As we continue in this series, we're going to look today, like at any meal or anytime we have a party, there's always like an invitation that has to go out, right? And so there are certain people who are invited to the party. You ever been somewhere, maybe at a party or a dinner, you got invited to, and you got there, you sat down, you enjoying the meal, whatever it is, and you just, in that very moment, you knew, I don't really belong here. That ever happened to anybody besides just me? A few years ago, a good friend of mine who lives in D.C. invited myself and a couple of my preacher friends up for dinner, and we went to dinner at this gentleman's house, and it was, this is the biggest house I've ever been in my life. It was ginormous. I could have just lived in the garage. And this thing is huge, and we're sitting down having dinner. Not only are we having dinner, but this man takes me into this room where he has all his beef dry aging it. He got a room for that. I told you this house was big. And we get through there. The steak was amazing. And we get through and we're sitting down, we're eating dinner, and I'm having this conversation with this guy beside me who I don't know who this guy is. And he begins to tell me just about how all his dealings at the White House and all these people that he knows and these interactions that he's had. And I got curious, at the White House, they don't just let anybody in the White House. You know what I mean? It's like, you got to kind of be somebody. So I just kind of asked him, what is it that you do? And he said, well, I'm a retired 4-star general. Here I am, having dinner with a 4-star general and just the preacher of a church in the metropolis of Palmyra. But sometimes we just feel like we don't fit or we don't belong. I think that that's probably one of the biggest issues in our world that people are facing right now, is that people don't know their true value. People don't understand that they are loved and created in the image of God. It's not any one person on this planet who gives me worth. My worth comes because Jesus died for me. Mental illness and suicide rates are at all-time highs. And I believe if we broke it down, people just don't feel valued and loved. People feel like they are a lost cause. I was doing some research for this message and just wanted to look at death rates and mental illness rates and those types of things. And so I just typed in people who felt like giving up but didn't, because they wanted this amazing story to share with you about this person who felt like giving up but didn't, and there are all kinds of stories we could share, whether it be inventors who tried again and failed again and then learned how to build whatever. But I just typed in people who felt like giving up but didn't. And just from typing that in to the search bar, immediately what came up was kind of like this community forum where people can post and say different things about different topics and all that. And the very first one, just typing in people who felt like giving up but didn't, here's the very first thing that popped up. And I quote, I'm 12, almost 13, and I don't think I can do it anymore. I'm 12, almost 13, and I don't think I can do it anymore. Here's a 12-year-old posting on the World Wide Web that they don't think that they can do life anymore. I don't know about you, but in my day and time at 12, I didn't have a care in the world. And we find ourselves where people in our world feel like they are a lost cause, like they can't do life anymore, like it's just worth giving up. And let me just tell you, with God, there are no lost causes. Just like Gonzalo Jimenez. On January 7th, 2018, employees of a prison in northern Spain found Gonzalo Montoya Jimenez unresponsive in his jail cell. Reportedly, upon the discovery of his body, 3 forensic doctors examined him and declared him dead. His body was taken away for autopsy, during which staff prepared his body for the procedure by drawing marks on him, but then Jimenez began to snore 4 hours after he had supposedly died. The conclusion likely arose from Jimenez's condition. He had epilepsy, which can sometimes trigger a deep trance-like sleep. Sure, I'm glad they didn't give up on him. With God, there are no lost causes. And so that's going to be the theme of our text. That's going to be the theme of this message. And I want you just to sit back and take in what God is trying to tell you this morning, that you are loved, that you are cared about, and that you are not a lost cause. Let's get a little bit of context before we jump in to Luke chapter 5. That's where I'm going to be this morning. Luke chapter 5, you got a Bible, you can open up there. Maybe your smartphone, whatever it is. Luke chapter 5, I'm going to start in verse 1 here in just a moment. You know, when we pick up in Luke chapter 5, Jesus has just been baptized by John. And you remember what Jesus does next immediately after his baptism? All right, let me tell you. He goes out. Or you could read it later too, but I'm going to tell you. He goes out and it begins his time in the wilderness tempted by Satan, right? And you remember that Jesus faces all the same type of temptation like you and I do, the lust of his eyes, the lust of his flesh, the pride of life. And as Satan continues to tempt Jesus, and Jesus continues to fight against Satan by using what? God's word, right? And he begins his ministry right after that, traveling around and beginning to heal people and preach and teach and all those different types of things. And that's kind of where we pick up in Luke chapter 5. So remember that Jesus is fresh out of the waters of baptism. He's been raised, and so now he's going to go off into the wilderness. He's had this time with Satan and this temptation from Satan, and he's overcome Satan with God's word, and then he begins his ministry. And so this is the very start of that ministry, Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 1. One day, Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. I told Jake and them, we tried to go through that earlier. I was trying to figure out how to say that. And I had it down. Then when I got here reading, I messed it all up. People were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, and the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. He sat down and taught the people from the boat. Now listen, here's what we got. Is Jesus has walked down to the shore. There's like this body of water behind him. And so let's just imagine that the body of water is behind me, and so Jesus is here, and there's a crowd gathering, but it wasn't Super Bowl Sunday, and it wasn't snowing outside, so it was a large crowd. And they were all gathered, and so they're beginning to kind of crowd in on Jesus, and he looks over, and he sees this boat sitting there. And I think 2 things kind of go through Jesus' mind. He goes, one, is such a large crowd, like it's kind of just crowding in on me. If I could get out into the water, then more people could gather around, and I could preach and teach, and it would be easily heard, and all those types of things would happen, right? And so I think the first part of Jesus' thing is like, I just got to get in here so that I can get this message out to more people. But I think the second part of that is Jesus goes, he already knows what he's about to do with Peter, James, and John, those types of things. He already knows what is getting ready to happen, how he's getting ready to just turn them into fishers of men, right? Then he picks up in verse 4. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." And when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll fish for people." Jesus gets done speaking and presenting this message, and he looks at Simon and says, "Put out into deep water and let down your nets." And I could just picture Simon Peter's face. It's kind of this thing like, okay. Like this whole teaching thing, borrowing the boat, that was cool. But you're a carpenter, tradesman. We're the fishermen. We know what we're doing. He says, "Man, we've worked hard all night. We haven't caught anything." Now, typically, these fishermen would fish kind of in shallow water. Anybody ever been in shallow water? I mean, where you could kind of see your feet and you see all those little fish swimming around. There's big groups and schools of fish. I just kind of imagine that's kind of what Peter, James, and John are doing. And let's be honest, your net's only so big, right? And so, your net's only so big, so there's only so much water you can go out into for your net to work effectively, right? And so they're out there, and I got to imagine that typically what they're doing is they're letting down their nets in this shallow water, and they're really focused on the quantity of fish that they can take at one time. They're not so much worried about the quality of those fish. They're just worried about taking in this huge number of fish, right? And so they go out there and they're letting down their nets, and they let them into shallow water. They catch swarms of fish. I'm guessing that they were, most of the time kind of comes and goes, but they're having good days and bad days. And I really love Simon's response to Jesus, though. It shows he already has a respect and already has some loyalty to Jesus. He says, "Master," acknowledging who Jesus is. And then I love that he just says, "Because you say so." He doesn't ask any questions. There's not a whole lot of banter. There's not a lot of back and forth about, are you sure? Like, deep water? He doesn't go, kind of going through a hard time in life right now. I got a lot going on with the kids. He doesn't even say, "Do we really have to dirty the nets again?" I mean, that's what they were doing. They were cleaning the nets when Jesus says, "Hey, can I borrow your boat?" We'll go out in the boat, which, if they drop them down in the water, means what? They're going to have to be cleaned again. He doesn't do that. He just simply says, "Because you say so." And with their obedience came a huge catch a fish. So many that the nets begin to break, and they signal others and the other boat to come over. I can just imagine this look on their faces as they begin to drag up these nets, and the nets beginning to break. And at some point, I mean, listen, they're not in like this huge fishing vessel like we see today. You know what I mean? They're in a regular little boat. And I can imagine at some point, all these fish, they're waist deep in fish all of a sudden, and they're going, Houston, we got a problem. They look over and see James, come on over here. Hey, get help with the net. And then at some point, they begin to fill their boat up. And about some point, they get waist deep in fish. And their boats begin to sink. And they're going, Houston, we got a problem. When Peter sees this, his response is the same thing, the same way that we should respond anytime we see a miracle, anytime we have an interaction with Jesus. Peter just falls at the feet of Jesus and acknowledges, I'm a sinful man. When I come in contact with Jesus, the only thing that's left for me to do is that very same action. Because here's kind of the truth, or the bad news, however you want to see it, is we're all sinful people. And so the fact of the matter is, we're all sinful and we need Jesus. Without Jesus, I am worthless. Without Jesus, I'm nothing. Jesus gives me my worth and my very being. I wonder what it would be like if we put out into deep water. As most of you know, I love to hunt and fish, and so when it's not hunting season, it's fishing season. And we have a small pond near our house, and we usually go to that pond to go fishing just because it's in walking distance. We can throw everything. I mean, we can carry this stuff and walk up there. Typically, we don't do that because we're lazy. But typically, we throw everything in the back of the truck and drive up there and get out, and we walk around, fish, whatever, right? And we've come to the conclusion that there is one section of this pond that's about 8 to 10 foot deep, right? But generally speaking, this pond is very shallow. And Cullen absolutely hates to fish there. This is why. Because it's shallow and those types of things, I mean, you could go up there and you can catch a couple fish every day. I think it's the same two fish. They're not real smart. But you can catch a couple fish every day, but they're not going to be huge fish. They're going to be little teeny fish. It's still fun, whatever, you throw them back, have a good time. But he doesn't like to go there because it's so shallow and he knows there's no large fish out there to catch. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to go with some guys from here, and we went and chartered a boat out of Oregon Inlet and went out deep sea fishing. Anybody ever done that? Man, if you ain't done that, I don't know if you really lived at some point. Man, it was a blast, and we got out there, we caught mahi, we caught all kinds of different fish, and even at one point, I hooked a white marlin and got to reel that baby in. And it did that whole thing like we were on Discovery Channel, that thing come out of water, did all that. And what we know is, when they go out there deep sea fishing, they go out there to find the Gulf Stream and where the warm water is at and it's deep and all these fish are kind of going through there, right? And I think that's kind of the point. To catch bigger quality fish, sometimes we got to move out into deep water. I think Jesus knew that when he's sharing that with Peter, James, and John. And if we're going to be all in, sometimes we got to wade out into deep water. Aaron Chambers said it this way: big fish typically live in deep water, and lost souls often live in the deep too. Folks, it might be time that we get deeper in our community, that we get a little bit more involved. Maybe it's time we get deeper into our counterculture. Maybe it's time we join a club that will help us meet a variety of people we wouldn't normally interact with. Maybe we get deeper into our government. You know, we love to complain about the government, don't we? It's easy to throw stones from outside. Maybe we should start running for office. Maybe we should get a little deeper into the bar scene. And I don't mean that by drinking. I mean that like maybe we should find a local bar and see if the owner might let us have a Bible study on Sunday. And you say, that could never happen. Trust me, there are more than one church in Virginia that started in a bar. Maybe we get deeper into our school system. Lord knows the school system needs it. Maybe we get deeper into our school system. We join the school board. We get involved with the PTA, whatever it is. You see, all of those things need people of faith, Christian people who are willing to share love and grace and mercy. I've yet to meet a person of great faith who isn't a great fisherman as well. Jesus doesn't believe in lost causes. No one or no situation is too far gone to be saved. At least not as long as Jesus is around. Secondly, maybe it's time we let down our nets. Let me give you a valuable fishing lesson for today. It's really hard to catch fish if you don't put your bait in the water. Imagine that. You see, you can have the correct bait. You can have it tied perfectly on your line. You can be at the pond where fish are almost jumping in the boat. But if you don't put your bait in the water, you're never going to catch anything. Maybe another way to say it is it's going to be real hard to reel people in for Jesus if we never put our faith into action. You know, Noah put his faith into action. He didn't just go, rain's coming. Just wait for God to save us. He didn't do that, did he? What did he do? He built a boat, right? Abraham put his faith into action. He built an altar and put his son Isaac on it. Moses put his faith into action when he faced Pharaoh. The Israelites proved their faith by walking around Jericho. Peter proved his faith by what? He got out of the boat. Remember that? Peter gets a hard time about that a lot of times. Well, he began to sink. Yeah, but everybody else stayed in the boat. You see, Peter put his faith into action. James chapter 2, verse 26 says this, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. If we'll go out into deep water, if we'll let down our nets, Luke chapter 5, verse 11, so they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. You see, if we'll let out into deep water, and if we'll let down our nets, Jesus will give us an amazing mission. With God, there are no lost causes. Maybe you're here today, maybe you're watching online. Let me just say a few things to close this morning. I don't care where you've been. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you're currently addicted to. Hear me. Your life has purpose. God has a plan for you. You are created in the image of God, and you are loved. Don't allow Satan to lie to you anymore. You are special. You are cared for by the Creator of the universe. I know there's someone in this room, there's someone watching online that feels like, I just can't do this anymore. Don't give up. Jesus has a purpose for your life. You are special. God give us all a unique purpose. And we can come together in the fact that Jesus has the power to change lives. Not only have I seen it, it happened to me. The question is, will we go out into deep water? Will we wade out into some of those situations that feel like they could just drown us? Will we let down our nets? Will we really put our faith into action? Or will we just continue to talk about it? I don't want to just talk about it. I want to be about it. I guess the real question this morning is, will we follow him?